You don't need to arrive anywhere tonight. There's nothing you need to prepare for, nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to hold in place. You can allow yourself to settle exactly where you are. Whether you're lying down or sitting comfortably, whether your eyes are open or closed, there's no correct way to begin. This moment does not require effort. You may notice the simple fact that you're breathing, not something you need to control, just something that is already happening. Breath arriving and leaving at its own pace. You don't need to follow it closely. You can let it move in the background while you rest your attention here. There is nowhere else you need to go. If the day has been full, you do not need to review it. If thoughts are still moving, you do not need to quiet them. Everything is allowed to be as it is. This time is not for solving, not for understanding, not for improving anything about yourself. It is simply a space where nothing is being asked of you. You may notice the surface of your body making contact with what supports you, the weight of your body being received. There is no need to hold yourself up. You can let gravity do that for you. If you sense any areas of tension, you don't need to change them. You don't need to release them. Just notice that they are there and that you're not required to act on them. Often, when effort stops, the body begins to soften on its own. And if it doesn't, that is fine too. There is no demand for relaxation here, only permission for rest. You may notice sounds around you, near sounds, distant sounds. You don't need to identify them. They can simply pass through awareness without pulling your attention outward. Even the sound of my voice does not need to be followed closely. You can let it be present without tracking every word. If your mind drifts, that is not a problem. If you miss something, there is nothing to catch up on. This is not a test. This is not instruction. It is an invitation to let the pace of the moment slow naturally. You are allowed to arrive gradually. There is no rush. Much of what you call yourself was not chosen. It was learned. Learned through repetition, through response, through what brought approval and what brought distance. Before there were words for identity, there were sensations. A sense of safety, or its absence. A sense of being welcomed, or tolerated. And slowly, without conscious effort, a way of being emerged that helped you belong. This was not deception, it was intelligence. Every human being learns early how to adapt to the emotional environment they are born into, how to read the room, how to anticipate needs, how to adjust tone, expression, and behavior to remain connected. Over time, these adaptations solidify. They form patterns. Patterns of personality, patterns of behavior, patterns of self-description. And eventually, these patterns are mistaken for who you are. This is what you would call the learned self. It is not false, but it is not the whole. The learned self is the version of you that knows how to survive, how to function, how to be acceptable. It learned what to emphasize and what to hide, what to express and what to suppress. And because it worked, because it kept you included, it stayed. Most people spend their lives refining this self, improving it, protecting it, defending it. They ask questions like, how can I be more confident? How can I be more successful? How can I be more lovable? These are not wrong questions, but they are often aimed at the wrong layer of your consciousness. Because beneath the learned self, there is something quieter, something that was never trained, never conditioned, never instructed. It does not strive, it does not perform, it simply is. The difficulty is that this deeper layer does not announce itself loudly. It does not compete with thought. It does not demand attention. It waits. And because the learned self is busy, planning, evaluating, comparing, this quieter presence is often overlooked. Many people assume that if something feels familiar, it must be authentic. But familiarity is not truth. It is repetition. The learned self feels familiar because it has been practiced. The authentic self feels unfamiliar because it has been allowed so little space. This is why moments of stillness can feel disorienting. When activity slows, when roles relax, when expectations drop away, there can be a sense of not knowing who you are. This can feel unsettling, but it is not emptiness, it is openness. The learned self thrives on definition. It wants labels, descriptions, narratives. The deeper self does not need these things. It is known not through description, but through presence. Through the simple experience of being aware. When you notice thoughts moving, but remain the one who notices, when emotions arise, but you are not consumed by them, when sensations come and go, yet something remains steady, that steadiness is not learned. It was not installed by environment or culture. It was there before strategy, before adaptation, before identity. This does not mean the learned self must be rejected. It has served you. It has carried you through life. But when it is mistaken for the whole, life can feel constricted. You may feel pressure to maintain consistency, to live up to an image, to protect a version of yourself that feels fragile. Authenticity does not come from improving the learned self. It comes from seeing it clearly, from recognizing it as a role rather than a residence. You can appreciate its skill without mistaking it for your essence. This recognition is gentle. It does not require confrontation, only curiosity. You might begin to notice moments when effort drops away, when you are not trying to be anything. Moments of absorption, moments of quiet attention, moments where you forget yourself and simply participate. These moments are not escapes. They are glimpses. Glimpses of a self that does not need to be assembled. A self that exists prior to evaluation. This self is not impressive. It does not seek to be. It is stable because it does not depend on circumstance. It does not rise with praise or fall with criticism. It remains. And because it remains, it can be trusted. Identity work, at its deepest level, is not about discovering who you should become. It is about remembering what was never lost. This remembering does not happen through effort. It happens through allowance. Through moments when you stop managing and start noticing. When you stop defining and start listening. The learned self will continue to function. It will speak, decide, and interact. But it will no longer be alone. Behind it, beneath it, Within it, there will be a quiet sense of being. Not something you have to hold, something that holds you. There is nothing you need to remember right now. Nothing you need to define. Nothing you need to explain. For this moment, you are free from descriptions. Before the name you were given, before the roles you learned to carry, before the expectations placed gently, or not so gently, upon you. There was already a sense of being. Not something you had to earn, not something you had to shape. Simply something that was present. You may notice that this sense of identity does not need words. It does not need a story. It does not need proof. It exists quietly beneath thought. You are not required to understand it. You are only invited to rest with it. There is no pressure here to become more than you are, and no need to be less. If thoughts arise, labels, memories, images, you can let them drift past, like clouds moving across a wide and patient sky. They do not define the sky, they simply pass through. You are not your productivity. You are not your history. You are not the momentum of your days. You are the awareness in which all of that appears. And this awareness is already whole. You may feel this as a gentle steadiness, a quiet presence, a sense of being anchored without effort. There is nothing fragile about this identity. It cannot be lost. It does not depend on attention. Even now, as you rest, it remains. You do not have to hold on to it. You cannot fall away from it. It is patient. It is spacious. It has been with you longer than memory, and it will remain even as you sleep. As you continue resting here, you may notice that identity does not need to be asserted. It does not ask you to stand tall. It does not ask you to claim space. It is already here, quietly supportive. Like the ground beneath you, it does not announce itself, yet it carries you fully. There is a kind of relief in realizing that you do not need to maintain who you are. You do not need to rehearse your personality. You do not need to protect an image. You do not need to stay alert. You are allowed to soften. The deeper identity, the one beneath effort, does not require vigilance. It welcomes rest. You may sense this as a gentle loosening, a permission to let go of holding patterns, a quiet exhale inside. Nothing about you is at risk here. Even if you drift, even if awareness becomes hazy, even if sleep arrives without announcement, your identity remains intact. It is not something that disappears when the mind grows quiet. It is something that becomes more evident. There is safety in not needing to know who you are tonight. You can simply be. If it feels right, you may imagine setting down the roles of the day, placing them gently aside, not rejecting them, just letting them rest. They will be there if needed, but they do not need your attention now. What remains is simple, uncomplicated, enough. And as this simplicity settles, you may find yourself drifting naturally towards rest. There is no finish line, no destination, only a quiet continuity, carrying you effortlessly from wakefulness towards sleep. As you rest here, you may begin to notice something simple. Identity does not need to be solved. It does not need to be tightened into a definition. It can be allowed to remain open and still feel safe. There is a quiet difference between knowing who you are and trying to hold who you are. Holding is effort. Knowing is natural. You may have spent years holding yourself together through thought, through plans, through explanations, through stories that kept life coherent. And that coherence may have been necessary. But in this moment, you are allowed to loosen the grip. Not to lose yourself, but to rest in what you are beneath management. Notice that you are here, not as an idea, but as experience. Breathing, listening, aware. And the awareness that knows breathing is happening is not in a hurry. It does not need to get anywhere. It simply knows. Thought may still appear, a sentence, a memory, an image, and you can let it arrive without following it. You do not need to push it away. You do not need to complete it. You can let it float and pass. There is a quiet strength in being able to remain with awareness without becoming the content of the mind. This is not something you have to learn. It is something you can notice. Because even now, something in you is steady. Even if the mind is active, the steadiness is still here. You may sense it as space, a soft openness behind your face, a calm background in the chest, a gentle stillness beneath sensation. You do not need to locate it precisely. You only need to notice that experience is being held without effort. This is the identity beneath role. Not the identity of personality, but the identity of presence. And presence does not need to be impressive. It does not need to be consistent. It does not need to be understood by anyone. It simply is. If it feels right, you can imagine the learned self as a set of clothing. Useful, familiar, appropriate in daily life. And tonight, you can set that clothing down. Not rejecting it, just letting it rest. You do not need to carry your name through the night. You do not need to carry your reputation. You do not need to carry your responsibilities. Those things can return when morning comes. Right now, your only task is to be. And being is effortless. There can be a quiet relief in realizing that you are not required to perform identity. You can allow yourself to be undefined. You can allow yourself to be spacious. You can allow yourself to be incomplete. Because the deeper identity is not built from completion. It is built from presence. Notice how the body responds when you stop trying to define yourself. There may be a softening, a loosening in the forehead, a release behind the eyes, a gentle drop in the shoulders. Not forced, allowed. And if tension remains, it is welcome too. You are not trying to become perfect. You are simply letting everything be included, without needing it to mean something about you. This is one of the simplest forms of freedom: to experience life without turning it into a verdict, to feel sensations without turning them into identity, to have thoughts without becoming trapped inside them. This is the quiet intelligence of awareness. It holds experience without clinging. It allows movement without fear. It remains. And because it remains, it offers a kind of safety that does not depend on circumstances. As you rest with this, identity becomes less of a structure and more of a feeling. A quiet sense of being held by something steady. And you may notice gradually that you do not need to be someone to rest. You can rest as awareness. You can rest as presence. You can rest as what you are before the mind begins describing. And if sleep arrives, it can arrive gently, without you needing to do anything to invite it. Conditioning, roles, and the survival self. The learned self does not arise randomly. It forms in response to need. Specifically, the need to remain connected, to stay safe, to belong. From the earliest moments of life, the nervous system begins to read its environment. It notices what brings closeness and what creates distance. What is welcomed, what is ignored, what is corrected, what is rewarded. And slowly, a strategy emerges, a way of being that helps maintain attachment. This strategy is not chosen consciously. It is absorbed. It lives in posture, tone of voice, timing, and restraint. It becomes what we call conditioning. Conditioning is not an enemy. It is an imprint, a record of what was required in order to stay connected. For some, connection came through achievement. For others, through caretaking. For others, through silence, compliance, humor, or strength. Each role made sense in the context in which it formed. And because it worked, it stayed. Over time, these roles become familiar. So familiar that they feel natural. You may not even recognize them as roles. They simply feel like you. You might think, I am the responsible one. I am the strong one. I am the easygoing one. I am the one who understands. But these identities did not arise in isolation. They arose in relationship. They are the nervous system's way of navigating the world. This is what is referred to as the survival self. Not survival in the dramatic sense, but survival as continuity of connection. The survival self is oriented toward outcomes. It scans for signals. It anticipates reactions. It adjusts behavior accordingly. It is highly intelligent, but it is also effortful, because it must constantly monitor whether it is doing enough, being enough, or remaining acceptable. When the survival self is dominant, life can feel like performance. Even in moments of rest, there may be a subtle vigilance, a sense of needing to manage impressions, to maintain coherence, to avoid disruption. This can be exhausting, but because it has been practiced for so long, it may not register as strain. It simply feels normal. Many people do not realize how much energy they are using to hold their identity together. They believe they are tired because of circumstances, but often the fatigue comes from maintaining roles that no longer fit. The survival self resists stillness, because in stillness there is no role to play, no function to perform. And without function there can be uncertainty. Who am I if I'm not needed? Who am I if I'm not useful? Who am I if I stop managing? These questions are not intellectual, they are visceral, they touch the body. This is why slowing down can feel uncomfortable. Not because there is something wrong, but because the survival self does not know how to relax. It was not designed for rest, it was designed for adaptation. But there is another layer of identity that does not depend on adaptation. A layer that is present before roles are activated. It does not scan for approval. It does not measure worth. It does not disappear when roles dissolve. This layer is often first noticed in moments when the survival self loosens. Moments of quiet presence. Moments of absorption. Moments when attention settles without agenda. In these moments, there is a sense of being without effort. Nothing is being proven. Nothing is being protected. And yet, something is clearly here. This is not a new self. It is the absence of strategy. It is what remains when conditioning pauses. The survival self may fear this. It may interpret the absence of role as danger. But danger is not present, only unfamiliarity. The survival self was never taught how to trust being, so it fills space with doing. Identity work does not require eliminating the survival self. It requires contextualizing it, seeing it as a function, not a definition. You can thank it for what it has done, for how it kept you connected, and at the same time, you can begin to loosen its grip on your sense of who you are. You can notice when a role activates, not to suppress it, but to recognize it. To say internally, this is the part of me that learned how to survive. And in that recognition, something shifts. You are no longer fully inside the role. You are aware of it. And awareness changes relationship. The survival self does not disappear, but it no longer has to lead. It can rest when rest is available. It can respond rather than react. And beneath it, there is a quieter sense of identity. One that does not depend on approval. One that does not contract under pressure. One that remains even when roles change. This is not something to achieve. It is something to notice, something that reveals itself when effort softens, when roles loosen, when you allow yourself to be present without function. The witness beneath the self. Beneath every role you play, beneath every thought you think, there is something quietly present. It does not speak loudly. It does not compete for attention. And yet it has been here for as long as you can remember. This is the part of you that notices thoughts as they arise, notices emotions as they move, notices sensations in the body. It does not need to comment. It does not need to explain. It simply witnesses. Most people live as though they are identical to what passes through their awareness. They believe they are their thoughts. They believe they are their emotions. They believe they are their reactions. But if that were true, there would be no way to observe them. And yet, observation is happening. You can notice a thought without choosing it. You can feel an emotion without becoming it. You can sense tension without being defined by it. This noticing is not an action. It does not require effort. It is already occurring. The mind may resist this idea. It may try to turn witnessing into something to do, something to practice. But witnessing is not a technique, it is a fact. Right now, as you listen to these words, there is an awareness that knows you are listening. That awareness does not need instruction, it does not need improvement. It has not been shaped by your history. It was present before you learned how to survive, before you formed opinions, before you adopted roles. This witnessing presence is not personal in the way identity is personal. It does not have preferences. It does not defend itself. It does not seek validation. It simply allows experience to appear. This is why, in moments of deep stillness, people often report a sense of peace that feels unrelated to circumstances. Nothing external has changed, and yet something feels lighter. What has changed is identification. Attention has shifted from being inside experience to resting as awareness of experience. This shift is subtle, and because it is subtle, it is often overlooked. The survival self is accustomed to occupying the center. It narrates, it evaluates, it plans. It assumes that without its commentary, nothing will function. But the witness does not interfere. It does not take control. It simply remains. And because it remains, it offers stability that roles cannot. Roles come and go. Thoughts rise and fall. Emotions surge and subside, but awareness remains constant. This is not something to believe. It is something to notice. You can notice it now, without effort. Notice that whatever you are experiencing is known, and that knowing is steady. This knowing does not age. It does not carry regret. It does not anticipate the future. It exists only now. When you rest in this witnessing presence, identity loosens. Not because identity disappears, but because it is no longer mistaken for the whole. You still have a name. You still have preferences. You still participate in life. But there is a sense of space around experience. A sense that you are not trapped inside every reaction. This is deeply freeing, because it means you are not required to fix yourself in order to be at ease. Ease arises from remembering what you are beneath effort. The witness does not judge the survival self. It does not try to eliminate it. It simply sees it. And in being seen, the survival self softens. It no longer has to prove itself. It no longer has to dominate attention. It can function when needed and rest when not. This is not dissociation, it is integration. You are not stepping away from life, you are stepping into a wider context. A context in which thoughts, emotions, and roles are allowed to exist without defining you. This witnessing presence is not distant, it is intimate. Closer than thought, closer than emotion. It is the quiet sense of being that has always been here, unchanged by success, unharmed by failure. And when identity is grounded here, life feels less fragile. Because who you are is no longer dependent on what happens. You are still involved, still caring, still responsive, but no longer consumed. This is the beginning of identity rooted in awareness rather than effort. Conditioning, roles, and the survival self. Identity and the body, where the self is felt. While identity is often discussed as a mental construct, it is lived in the body. Before you think who you are, you feel how you are. tension, ease, expansion, contraction. These sensations form the ground upon which identity is built. Many people attempt to understand themselves through thought alone. They analyze patterns, they tell stories, they explain behavior. But identity is not held only in narrative, it is held in posture, in breath, in the way the jaw tightens when something feels threatening. It is held in the shoulders that lift unconsciously, in the stomach that tightens before words are spoken. The body remembers long before the mind explains. This is why identity can persist even after beliefs change. You may understand intellectually that you are safe, and yet the body may still brace. This bracing is not resistance, it is memory. The nervous system learned over time how to protect continuity, how to stay ready. And so identity is reinforced not only through thought, but through sensation. When the body remains in vigilance, the survival self remains active. It continues to scan. It continues to prepare. Even in moments of rest, there may be a subtle holding, a readiness that never fully relaxes. This can feel like restlessness or anxiety, or simply a sense of never quite settling. Identity work that ignores the body often stalls here, because the mind may loosen its grip while the body still holds the shape of who it learned to be. Integration happens when awareness includes sensation, when attention gently moves into the felt experience of being, not to change it, not to fix it, just to notice. You might begin to notice how certain identities feel. The responsible one may feel tight in the chest. The strong one may feel rigid in the spine. The easygoing one may feel disconnected from anger. These are not problems, they are patterns. Patterns that once served a purpose. When awareness meets these patterns without judgment, something important happens. The body begins to feel seen. And when the body feels seen, it can soften. This softening is not forced, it is allowed. Identity begins to shift not because you decide to change, but because holding becomes unnecessary. The body learns that it no longer has to maintain the same posture to remain safe. This is where identity becomes embodied rather than conceptual. You are no longer asking, "Who should I be?" You are sensing, "Who am I when I allow myself to relax?" Often what emerges is surprisingly simple. A sense of grounded presence, a quiet aliveness, a feeling of being here without performance. This is not a dramatic revelation. It is subtle, but it is deeply stabilizing. The body knows how to be without explanation. It breathes, it feels, it responds. When identity is allowed to be informed by the body, it becomes more fluid, less defended, less rigid. You may notice that you react less quickly, that you pause more naturally, that your responses feel more aligned with what is actually happening rather than what you expect to happen. This is because the body is no longer being overridden, it is being included. Identity, when grounded in sensation, feels trustworthy. It does not need to assert itself. It does not need to prove anything. It simply participates. And when challenges arise, the body responds appropriately rather than reflexively. This is not something to practice, it is something to allow. By giving attention to the body with kindness and curiosity, identity begins to reorganize itself, not from the top down, but from the inside out. What you discover is not a new self. It is the same quiet presence you've already encountered, but now it is felt, lived, embodied. And because it is embodied, it can remain present even in moments of stress, even in moments of uncertainty.
Identity becomes less about maintaining an image and more about inhabiting a living process. A process that includes sensation, awareness, and response. This is where identity becomes whole.
Freedom without a fixed self. Much of what feels constricting in life comes from the effort to remain consistent, to be recognizable, predictable, defined. The learned self depends on this consistency. It organizes life around continuity, around being the same person from moment to moment, from situation to situation. At first, this can feel stabilizing, but over time it can become limiting. Because life itself is not fixed. It moves, it changes. It asks different things of us at different times. When identity is rigid, change feels threatening. Growth feels like loss, and uncertainty feels like danger. This is why many people resist transformation even when they long for it. They sense, often unconsciously, that becoming something new might require letting go of who they believe they are. Freedom begins when identity loosens, not dissolves, not disappears, but relaxes its grip. This does not mean you lose coherence. It means coherence becomes flexible. You are no longer required to defend a single version of yourself. You are allowed to respond to what is present. This flexibility is deeply freeing, because it means you can meet life as it unfolds, rather than forcing it to fit a story. A fixed self needs constant reinforcement. It needs confirmation that it is still valid. It seeks feedback, comparison, reassurance. And when that feedback is missing or negative, it suffers. A fluid self does not depend on reinforcement in the same way. It is anchored elsewhere, in awareness, in presence, in the simple fact of being. This does not make you passive, it makes you responsive. You can still take action, still make decisions, still hold values. But these arise from alignment rather than defense. You begin to notice how much energy was previously spent maintaining an image, explaining yourself, justifying choices, protecting identity. As this energy is released, something opens. Curiosity replaces control. You allow yourself to change your mind, to outgrow old patterns, to explore new expressions without fear of inconsistency. This is not instability, it is adaptability. Life requires adaptability, a self that can move without breaking, without collapsing when circumstances shift. When identity is no longer fixed, you experience a different kind of confidence. Not the confidence of certainty, but the confidence of presence. A knowing that whatever arises, you can meet it. Because who you are is not dependent on maintaining a particular shape. This is often misunderstood. People fear that without a fixed self, they will become lost. But what actually happens is the opposite. You become more oriented, not less. Because you are responding to what is real rather than what is expected. You may notice that decisions feel clearer, not because you have more information, but because there is less internal conflict. You are not negotiating between competing identities. You are listening to the body, listening to awareness, listening to what feels aligned in this moment. Freedom without a fixed self does not mean freedom from responsibility. It means responsibility without self-constriction. You act because it is appropriate, not because it confirms who you think you are. You rest because rest is needed, not because you have earned it. You speak because truth wants expression, not because silence threatens identity. This is a quieter way of living, but it is also more honest. Identity becomes something that participates in life, not something that supervises it. You still have preferences, you still have history, but you are no longer limited by who you were. The past informs, but it does not define. This is freedom. Not freedom from form, but freedom from fixation. A self that can move without fear. A self that can change without collapse. A self that can rest without disappearing. This freedom is not something to reach. It emerges naturally when identity is grounded in presence rather than story. Living from essence rather than image. When identity is no longer anchored in image, life begins to feel less performative. There's less effort spent managing how you are perceived, less tension around being understood, less need to be consistent for the sake of recognition. This does not mean you stop caring, it means you stop curating. Living from image requires constant adjustment. You monitor how you appear, you refine how you speak, you anticipate how actions might be interpreted. Even in moments of authenticity, there can be an awareness of being seen. This subtle self-monitoring is exhausting. And because it has often been practiced for years, it may not register as effort. It simply feels like being yourself. But essence is different. Essence does not announce itself. It does not seek coherence through appearance. It expresses naturally, without rehearsal. When you live from essence, action arises from alignment rather than protection. You speak because something is true, not because silence would feel like disappearance. You act because something feels alive, not because inaction would threaten identity. This way of living feels quieter, less dramatic, but also more grounded. Because you are no longer negotiating between who you feel you are and who you feel you must be. There is only response. Essence is not something separate from daily life. It does not require retreat or withdrawal. It shows up in simple ways, in how you listen, in how you move, in how you allow pauses without rushing to fill them. When essence is present, there's less need to convince, less need to justify, less need to defend. You may notice that conversations change. You are less reactive, more attentive. Not because you are trying to be calm, but because there's less at stake. Your sense of self is not being evaluated moment by moment. And because of this, you are more available. Available to hear what is actually being said. Available to notice what is happening in the room. Available to respond honestly without rehearsing. Living from essence also changes how you relate to difficulty. Challenges still arise, mistakes still happen, but they are no longer interpreted as threats to identity. They are experiences, not verdicts. You can acknowledge error without collapse. You can feel disappointment without self-rejection. You can adjust course without self-punishment. This creates resilience. Not the resilience of endurance, but the resilience of flexibility. A flexibility that allows learning without shame, growth without self-betrayal. Essence does not need to be protected. It cannot be damaged by failure. It cannot be diminished by misunderstanding. It remains intact because it is not constructed. And when you live from this place, Identity becomes a tool rather than a prison. You can use roles when they are helpful. You can release them when they are not. You are not required to abandon structure, only to stop mistaking it for substance. This allows you to meet life with a sense of ease. Not because life becomes easier, but because you are no longer carrying the additional weight of maintaining an image. There is a simplicity here, a sense that you are allowed to be as you are without explanation. This does not make you passive. It makes you honest. Honest with yourself. Honest with others. And honesty, when grounded in presence, does not need to be forceful. It is quiet, clear, direct. Living from essence is not a destination. It is a continuous orientation, a willingness to return again and again to what feels true beneath habit, to listen inwardly before responding outwardly, to allow identity to remain flexible in the presence of change. This orientation does not demand perfection, only sincerity, only presence. And as this way of living stabilizes, you may notice something unexpected. You feel less defined, yet more real. Less certain, yet more grounded. Less attached to who you think you are, yet more at home in yourself. This is the paradox of essence. When you stop trying to be someone, you become fully present as yourself. Remembering what was never lost. Identity work often begins with questions. Who am I really? What is true beneath habit? What remains when roles soften? But as this exploration deepens, the questions themselves begin to relax. Not because they are answered, but because they are no longer urgent. You may notice that what you were seeking was never missing. It was simply overlooked. Much of life encourages you to define yourself, to become legible, predictable, consistent. And while definition has its uses, it can quietly obscure something essential. The deeper sense of being does not need to be named. It does not require confirmation. It is known through familiarity, not description. As you have seen, the learned self arose to meet conditions. It adapted, it protected, it organized experience. And the survival self carried that learning forward, often with great skill. There is nothing to undo here, nothing to dismantle. Integration does not mean rejection, it means inclusion. You allow the learned self to exist without letting it define the whole. You allow roles to function without mistaking them for essence. And in this allowance, something settles. You may notice moments when identity feels less central, when attention moves outward or inward without self-reference. Moments when you are simply present, listening, sensing, responding, without narrating who you are. These moments are not special, they are natural. They reveal how identity can be contextual rather than constant. This contextual identity is fluid. It adapts without fear. It responds without rigidity. It does not need to be defended because it is not the foundation. The foundation is awareness. The quiet sense of being that has accompanied every role, every change, every phase of life. This awareness did not arrive later. It has always been here. Watching, knowing, holding experience without grasping. When identity is integrated in this way, life feels less personal and more intimate at the same time. Less personal because events are no longer interpreted as reflections of worth. More intimate because experience is met directly, without filters of image or defense. You become available to life as it is, rather than as it should be. And from this availability, authentic action arises. Not action driven by self-maintenance, but action aligned with what is present. You speak when something needs to be said. You rest when rest is needed. You move when movement is called for. There is less internal negotiation, less friction. Identity becomes a flexible interface, not a fixed location. This does not remove uncertainty, but it changes your relationship to it. Uncertainty is no longer a threat to who you are. It is simply part of being alive. And because identity is no longer rigid, change feels less like loss. It feels like movement, like life continuing to unfold. This is what it means to remember what was never lost. Not to become someone else, but to recognize what has always been here. A presence that does not depend on story. A self that does not need to be maintained. A quiet, stable sense of being that remains no matter what roles come and go. And now you can let the words become simpler. Less to think about, more to feel. You are here, breathing, listening, and you are allowed to rest. Nothing needs to be fixed tonight. Nothing needs to be decided. Nothing needs to be carried. You can let identity become quiet. Let the mind stop reaching for definition. Let the body rest from holding a shape. There is a gentle steadiness underneath everything. Even if thoughts drift in, they can drift out. Even if sensations shift, they can soften. Even if the mind tries to understand, it can relax. You do not need to understand. You only need to be. And being is already happening. You can allow the next breath to arrive naturally, and the next, and the next. With nothing to achieve, with nothing to prove. You are safe to be undefined, safe to be quiet, safe to rest. And if the mind wants to name things, you can let it name them softly, and then let the names fade. The stillness does not need a name. The awareness does not need a label. The presence does not need a story. It is simply here. And you can let yourself drift, gently, naturally, without effort. Resting as what you are. There is nothing left to understand now, nothing to hold, nothing to resolve. You can let the mind rest from trying to define. Let the body soften from holding a shape. Notice the simple fact of being here, breathing, listening, aware. You do not need to locate yourself, you are already present. Thoughts may come and go, sensations may shift, emotions may pass through, and something remains. Quiet, steady, unchanged. You can rest here, not as an idea, not as a role, but as awareness itself. There is no effort required, no identity to maintain. Just this gentle presence that holds experience without needing to explain it. If sleep comes, allow it. If wakefulness remains, let it be soft. Nothing is demanded. Nothing is missing. You are not becoming who you are. You are remembering. And remembering does not require effort. It happens naturally when striving ends. Stay as long as you like. The stillness is patient.